All right. Hi. For those of you that are in the class that have seen me before, this is nothing new. But those of you that are in the online class and are watching because you want some sort of face-to-face interaction, here you go. My name is Jen. Nice to meet you. We're going to go ahead and start with this PowerPoint. So as I go along, I'm going to tell you where I'm at on the PowerPoint to make sure that you are on the same page as I am, so to speak, literally and figuratively. So we're doing chapter 2 today. And if you have chapter 2 open, you should see, I just totally messed this up. You should see a bunch of memes about the brain because that's the kind of person I am, somebody who post memes about the brain. So you're in the right place if that's what you're seeing. So when we go into slide number 2, we're talking about what defines the brain itself. And you have 2 different types of scientists, and they think very differently about what the brain is and how we should define it. So if you're a neurosurgeon, you're looking at the brain as a mass of tissues that needs to be handled very, very carefully when you're digging into the skull and, fidgeting around with a scalpel. For them, the brain is nothing more than an organ in the body that we need to be very, very careful with because it affects everything else in our entire being. So to a neuroscientist, a brain is so much more than just this 3-pound massive organ. It is this complex thing that makes us who we are, encompasses everything that we do in terms of anything related to motor skills, eating, sleeping, drinking, watching me right now on this video, laughing at memes. Everything comes from the brain in some way, shape, or form. So slide number 3, we have Carl Lashley, who thought his hypothesis way back in the day was that we could break the brain down into something called an engram. So think of like Lego blocks building up inside your brain to make all of these different memories create some sort of composite whole. And his idea was that you could break down different categorizations of memories. So your memory of watching this, say, would be one of those little units. And you'd be able to identify, in theory, where that unit actually was inside your brain. So if you've seen Inside Out, which most people have, if you haven't, you should, as psychology majors. It's a very good movie for you to watch. Think of all of the little orbs that all of the memories were encapsulated in as the little girl in the movie had them. That's kind of the idea that Lashley would have. He would very much approve of there being emotions in our head that were categorizing all of these little thoughts into these tiny little things that we could then go pick out of that library that you see in the picture in the slide and access on a whim based on what the particular memory was. So obviously, to us now, obviously, that's not something that actually exists. There is no such thing as an engram where you have this unit or this orb-like thing as in Inside Out that's in your brain that has these memories stored in these nice, neat little compartments that you can just go select at random. But we have done, as neuroscientists, some degree of research and found that there is some way to locate particular types of memory in overall areas of the brain. But it's a very new concept, and it's something that would take a lot of money, a lot of funding, a lot of time and effort in terms of research with MRI machines and whatnot to figure out exactly where these memories are coming from, or if there'd be any use in even figuring out where those memories were coming from. If you wanted to be like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, another good memory movie, that's something that you would want to look into. So slide 4. What we do know that our brain is broken up into in terms of units are neurons. Neurons are the smallest little biological entities, the cells that make up your brain and influence how your brain communicates within itself. So they are like the little mental Legos that we have building up in our brain, and they communicate with each other due to very specific mechanisms. So slide 5 is where we'll start seeing how neurons are broken down. So neurons are composed of some really key parts. The first being the nucleus of the neuron. So at the center of a neuron, which you can see, these slides will have the same picture along the bottom. At the center, you'll have your nucleus, which is where all of your chromosomes, your DNA, and whatnot are housed. And something cool that I learned recently, which is not actually taught in this class, you'd have to take sensation and perception. But color blindness is actually not something that has to do with the brain or particularly memory or any specific area of the brain like you might think. It's actually a chromosomal disorder which predominantly affects men because it is in the X chromosome. So men tend to be extremely more likely to be colorblind than women because they are born with 2 X chromosomes, whereas women have an X chromosome, or men are born with an X chromosome and a Y chromosome. So sorry on that one. So they have one chance at having an X chromosome that actually functions in terms of seeing color, whereas women have 2. So if they have one chromosome with the just genetic dysfunction of not being able to see particular types of colors, they have another one that can make up for it. So it's much less likely that they are going to have colorblind issues. So I accidentally just called men women and women men, but that's going to happen because I am sick and you're just going to have to deal with it. So we have our nucleus, and our nucleus is encapsulated by a soma or a cell body, which has a bunch of organelles that protect the nucleus and the DNA and chromosomes inside of it. So in terms of the actual communication, you'll see that we have something called dendrites. They look like little trees. There's lots of them. So dendrites are what receive information from other neurons. And we have all of these dendrites in the neuron so that a neuron can receive a lot of different signals from a lot of different other neuronal sources. So these dendrites are relatively short, and they communicate via an electrical pulse. So they send out these little electrical signals through their little tree branches. Dendrite actually is a derivative word from tree, so you can use that to remember it. And they send that message to, now I'm on slide 7, they send them via an axon. So every neuron has bunches and bunches and bunches of dendrites, unlimited numbers of dendrites, right? Every neuron only has one axon. So the axon is that long thing that you'll see has kind of somewhat of little tree-like shapes at the end of it, but there's only one that connects to an individual neuron. So each axon carries a particular message to that neuron. It's carrying in all of this information to one particular neuron, whereas that neuron can receive that kind of information from many different sources with the axon. So your axon is much longer than dendrites. You can see it in the picture. You have axons in your body that are up to 3 feet long in your spine, which is a pretty long way for your body to be sending communication from any source. So the reason why the axons can be longer is that instead of being purely electrical like the dendrites, they can be electrochemical. So they have this chemical component to them, which is called an action potential, which is what makes the signal strength that much stronger. So you kind of have this electrical sort of thing still going on, but this chemical insulation that makes it so that this process can transfer a lot of information without it getting lost, essentially. Which, if you look at the picture, you'll see these things called myelin sheaths that are in the connectors between the two tree-like parts of the picture. Those sheaths are the insulation that keep that signal strong, even though an axon can be extremely long. Are you excited yet? I know you're so excited. I have one thumb. So somebody out there is excited, and it's probably just because there's a meme in this. So when we look at our picture and we're looking at the communication between the neurons and the axons, they never actually touch. So, they get right up to each other and then they can never touch. It's such a sad love story between the axons and the dendrites. It's very sad. Just take a moment. They can't touch each other. What they do have is something called a synapse. So it is this area between the axon and the dendrite where that electrochemical component takes place, and the dendrites trigger the electrical component of the axons, and they kind of trade information in this synapse, which is where the chemicals are transferred, from the axon to the dendrite. So I'm on slide 9 now. So in that synapse, you have something called the terminal button, which is what is triggered by the electrical signal of the dendrite to send that chemical component of the axon and to release something called neurotransmitters. So neurotransmitters are some of the most important things in the universe. They're very important to you. They're important to me. They're what make us human. I said it. I totally said it. So all of this happens at the neuronal level. I'm on slide 10 now. So dendrites have stronger signals because they're shorter. Axons have longer. Axons have weaker signals because they are longer. There you go. That was that entire slide. But this is the one that I'm really excited about, okay? So pretend that you're actually watching and that this isn't in the background while you're cleaning something or abuela's throwing her chancleta at you or something, okay? If a neuron wore pants, how would it wear them? It's very important. Very. Like this, or like this. People are going to watch this later and they're going to have no idea what I'm talking about because they're not going to be looking at the actual PowerPoint, but important. Let me know this when you watch it. We'll have a poll. How do they wear pants? How do they do it? Not a single person's willing to tell me. This is going so well, guys. Thanks. So move on from that and start talking to you. I'll skip over to slide number 13, because you have to see this because it's awesome. Neurotransmitters are our friends. Do you even neurotransmit? So neurotransmitters are proteins that are involved in this process of the electrochemical transmission between the dendrites and the axons. So to be considered a neurotransmitter at all, this protein has to be able to bridge some sort of synapse between an axon and a dendrite. So not every axon and dendrite receive the same, they wear it like the first one. Thank you. Thank you. But what about the axon and the dendrite love story? What about that? What about that? So sorry. So not every neuron and axon have pants go on the axons. Okay, good. So the axons wear the pants in the relationship. Got it. People watching this later are not going to see your comments, but Javi says they wear the pants like the first one. Pants go on the axons. Martina says the second one because the axons are the feet. So we got 1 for A, 1 for B, 0 for C. I don't know. Why are you leaving the dendrites out of this? What if the dendrites want to wear pants too? What if they're all supposed to wear, like, what if the pants are supposed to go on everything? What if they need many pairs of pants? Somehow in this process, I have dropped more and more. Dendrites are hands. That's a very interesting hypothesis, dendrites. Then they would need gloves. So there should be something covering all parts of the neuron at all times. And I suppose somewhere around the synapse would be a belt, but you wouldn't be able to put it on anything because there's nothing that actually touches. So you'd have to have like a gravitational belt that just kept itself there, or maybe a nice t-shirt, maybe from Disney, because we're all pretty close to Disney. So now we've got in our head, just think, your neuron has gloves, and then it's got its nice Mickey Mouse shirt, and then the axons wear the pants. I don't know what's going on here. But not every axon and not every neuron are able to receive or send every single kind of neurotransmitter. Think of it like square peg, round hole, like they have a certain receiving shape to it and a certain sending thing, and they have to match up. And that's the way that this whole synapse works. This is the least sophisticated way you are ever going to hear about a synapse, but hey, we're working with what we've got. So we have two types of neurotransmitters. You have excitatory ones, which are pretty self-explanatory. They increase the activity of the neuron, and in this process, the action potential becomes stronger. And then you have inhibitory neurons, which are the exact opposite. They kind of slow down the neuron. They depress the neuron, not in the like clinical depression kind of way. Your neurons aren't running off and needing to take, Prozac or anything. They depress what it is that neurons actually do. Less action potential going on there. So like I said, depending on the particular neurotransmitter and the particular neuron, one neuron can excite, or one neurotransmitter could excite one neuron and it could inhibit another one. It just depends on your particular makeup in your brain. So if you look at slide 15, these are three of the main neurotransmitters that especially as psychology students you're going to hear about. You have dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin. So dopamine is an excitatory neurotransmitter. You're looking at something that gives you energy and adrenaline and a rush, and it's what people take, like energy drinks, drugs, anything you can think of that are in that like upper category, that is raising the level of your dopamine in your brain, which is giving you more and more energy to be like, oh my God, I can do all this stuff, right? So something like, what is the actual name of speed when you take it legally? That is something that makes you excitatory. It makes you able to do a lot of this stuff. But it also has something to do with your norepinephrine. If you're looking specifically at Adderall, that's the right name for it. Adderall Adderall increases your norepinephrine so that you have this ability to focus. And I misspoke when I meant that don't do this with food poisoning. It's not a good idea. So Adderall is something that decreases dopamine so that you can focus and increases your norepinephrine so that you can focus without looking at a billion different ways like you are when you have ADHD. I swear, I'll get through it. You see me in person, you know me better, right? Yeah. So your serotonin is more of your calm, happy, relaxed neurotransmitter. So if you look at slide 16, so different diseases or different neurotransmitters have different responses in your brain. So diseases like Parkinson's or multiple sclerosis, which was something that affects the myelin sheaths from a few slides ago, your brain is not producing enough dopamine. So you don't have enough energy in your body to sustain certain types of movement. So you become slower. You just don't have that energy to be able to do that. Ecstasy. So ecstasy is something where you have more serotonin, so you have more of that happy, feely sort of neurotransmitter, and you love everybody. That's why people take it, because it makes them feel really good about stuff. I would not know. I've never done a single drug in my life, which is why when we get to these sections with neurotransmitters and drugs and all of this stuff, I'm speaking solely from a textbook perspective, and hopefully all of you are too, because most of this stuff is not legal. So cocaine is actually a inhibitory neurotransmitter. So it blocks dopamine, meaning it inhibits dopamine, which reduces that energy level and gives you more of this like calm sort of effect that you would have from low dopamine, but regular levels of serotonin and norepinephrine in your body. So we're reducing the whole like go, go, go sort of stress out feeling and having the happy-go-lucky feelings there. So LSD, we're blocking both your happy-go-lucky stuff and your serotonin, and you have hyper focus, which is why when people take it, they tend to come up with their greatest ideas of like novels and paintings and movies and songs and whatever. It's a very creative sort of thing that you could take, but you shouldn't do it because it's illegal. So there's 3 at the bottom that actually are legal, 1 that's crappy for you, but 2 that are not so much. So if you look at caffeine, it kind of works in a similar way that some of the actual drugs do in terms of involving your muscle movement, giving you more energy, increasing dopamine to the areas of your brain that are involved in your motor function. So caffeine can be a good thing, but there are a lot of studies that show that consuming mass amounts of caffeine can actually have a degenerative effect on your brain. So nicotine calms you down, but chocolate does everything that nicotine does in terms of calming you down and making you feel soothed, but it doesn't have any of the bad side effects of smoking and lung cancer and all of the other horrible things that come with nicotine. I heard something very depressing. I don't know if it's true because it came from Facebook, but it said that chocolate was going to go extinct by the year 2050. If you learned nothing else, learn that you need to start stockpiling your chocolate, because apparently something going on in the environment, something about climate change, is affecting the areas that actually grow the cacao beans to make chocolate. So all of the really good stuff is probably going to go bye-bye and going to start being something that is synthetic. So that's kind of sad. We might have to rely on nicotine after all. No, I didn't just say that. Chocolate's never going to go away, right? Okay, so slide 17, we start looking at the actual composition of the brain. So you do have a right and a left hemisphere, but we do not have a right side and left side of our brain like you see people that are really good at art versus really good at math or whatever, and you're like, oh, I'm so left-brained or I'm so right-brained. It doesn't work like that. Your brain doesn't have, one side that just focuses on this and one side just focuses on that. If you were going to break the sides of the brain down by anything, I would think that you would say that the right side of the brain processes more of the things that are in the external environment. So specifically, it's spatial cognition and music processing, if you were to take the 2 most significant things that the right side processes. And then the left side is language and memory interaction. So you're looking at, from the right side, stuff that is coming in that you're processing, as opposed to the left, where it's more of a meaning-based internal thing. So even though language could be something that is spoken to you, so it comes from the outside in, it's still something that you attribute some sort of meaning to. So if you want my take on what left versus right brained is, that's how I would break it down. And if a person is only right brained and not left brained, maybe that's some of my ex-boyfriends. It's entirely possible that that's them. All spatial and music, no language and interaction. Almost as sad as the axon and dendrite love story. Just kidding. It's not all of them. So one main way that we separate the brain, aside from left and right, is top to bottom. So you can split it in half. If you're looking down at a brain, you can split it in half like that. Or don't cry for me. Don't cry. Cry for your own axons and dendrites that can't touch each other. There they are, your whole life. They're right there. They can never communicate. It's very sad. Very, very sad. So we can look down at a brain and cut it in half like that, or we can look at the brain like this and cut it in half at this level, which I'm at a lack of words. This level actually is horizontally. Hey. So when you're cutting the brain horizontally, you can separate it into the cortical brain, which is the top part, and the subcortical, which is the bottom part. So the subcortical brain is something that we share with most other species, almost all other species, depending on how sophisticated they are. So it regulates things like sleeping, eating, all of the functions that you need to do to stay alive. Those basic functions happen in the subcortical area, whereas the cortical area is what kind of separates us from most other species, with probably the exception of dolphins and different ape primate type species that still have some of these meaning related things. So we call it the cerebral cortex, the top, and it is where we process all of our more sophisticated meaning sort of things, emotion, everything that sets us apart from other species. So slide 19, the hippocampus. The hippocampus is amazing. There's actually two of them, and they are mirror images of one another in your brain. So you have a right and a left hippocampus. The subcortical system that it's part of is called limbic system. You might want to know that. And it processes mainly memory and emotion. So just like I was talking about the left versus the right side of the brain in terms of the right being more external and the left being more internal, damage to the hippocampus kind of follows my little theory there. So damage to the left involves your memory for stories and words and stuff that would be more internal to you, whereas damage to the right is more spatial related, like imagery and whatnot, things that are more external to you. So going to slide 20, the very first time that I taught this class, Pokemon Go had just come out. I still play it. I still play it all the time. Actually, I'm just going to show you something here. Just 1 second. I'm fairly certain of something here. Don't leave me. I'm looking for something. Hippo. Can you see him? There you go. He's still in there. He's happy. He's evolved. He's not quite the same seahorse that he once was, but the hippocampus is shaped like a seahorse. So you have two little seahorses in this like mirror image of each other in the base down here of your brain. And it's called hippocampus because that is the actual name for seahorse in Greek. So you've learned that chocolate might be going extinct and that hippocampus means seahorse in Greek. If nothing else, you know that. So next slide, the amygdala. As students, especially around exam time, the amygdala is probably one of the areas of the brain that you use the most. So the amygdala is specifically with memory and emotion and fear. So like different types of fear conditioning and emotion-based learning and whatnot. And I actually saw something. Don't judge me. There's a lot of stuff that you could judge in here today, but just don't do it. I was watching The Real Housewives of, I don't remember what city. I don't remember what city's on right now, but one of them, I think it might have been Dallas. Oh, those Dallas girls. And they were talking about the amygdala. Amygdala was actually in the name of the episode. And the woman was saying, oh man, I think that those Buddhist monks, they can shrink their amygdala, and it means that they have less emotional and fear response to stuff. And people are crazy. I don't know what to say. But there are people that think that you can shrink certain parts of your brain so that you can be different. I don't know. But your amygdala, it deals with your emotions and fears. So if you want to be like the Real Housewife from Dallas, which maybe you do because she looked pretty loaded to me, maybe try and shrink your amygdala. So 22, the diencephalon. So the diencephalon has 4 different parts to it, even though only 2 are listed there. So the diencephalon, if you were to like go to the base of your brain and think of like the exact center of the bottom of your brain, it's kind of where the diencephalon is. And it's made up of the thalamus, the subthalamus, the hypothalamus, and the epithalamus. So all 4 thalami are in there. And in addition to being involved with what goes on with your organs and your senses in terms of communicating what your body might need, so your feelings of hunger and whatnot, those types of sensations to your different organs, it also deals with the nervous system and the endocrine system via something called the pituitary gland. Which are all in the general area. So not only does the diencephalon do all of that, but it connects memory to all of the other parts of the brain. So it's very central in a lot of different things that we do. So when we have diencephalon damage, we can have something called Korsakoff's disease. And Korsakoff's is something that is talked about in much more detail in one of the last chapters of the books on memory disorders. But I can talk a little bit about it right now because I'm not sure if I'm going to make it to chapter 12 or 13 or whatever to speak about it face to face, because you might off me by then because you don't like listening to me. I don't know. Maybe you love this. Not sure. We're going to go with it. So Korsakoff's, think about somebody that has Alzheimer's. Think of like a severe case of Alzheimer's where you have trouble in terms of remembering and you have this degeneration of your capability to do anything and whatnot. Korsakoff's is similar to that in that you probably wouldn't be able to tell the difference between somebody who had Korsakoff's and Alzheimer's if you didn't know what the 2 diseases actually were. But Korsakoff's comes from a vitamin B deficiency that comes from alcoholism. So it will happen differently to different people based on how you process alcohol. I'm trying to find now Korsakoff's, this specific vitamin B1, just what I thought. So yeah, it's a vitamin B1 deficiency. So you might say like, oh, I have my crazy Uncle Joe and he gets trashed all the time at the family parties and he seems to be just fine. He wakes up the next morning and he's doing great. But does it only manifest from alcoholism? As far as I know, yes, it does only manifest from alcoholism because it's like street name is wet brain. And it's this oversaturation of the brain with alcohol. I don't think that anything else does it. I mean, it can be caused by other diseases. So like Korsakoff's itself can manifest from other sorts of disorders. But in terms of this wet brain thing, you're thinking most specifically of alcohol. Could be wrong, but when you read about it in any sort of text or whatever, like the textbook, or you go do an article search for it or whatnot, the predominant cause that's listed is alcohol. So it's 100% preventable also. So it's not something that somebody's born with. They're not born with the B1 deficiency and then they drink alcohol in some way, shape, or form, and then suddenly they have Korsakoff's. You're talking about somebody that is a very heavy alcohol drinker. And like I said, it'll be different based on how different people's bodies process it. And it's possible for somebody to drink a lot and not get Korsakoff's. But you're looking at somebody that's done this to themselves at this point. So not only do they have these symptoms of like dementia, Alzheimer's with this memory, they are unable to learn new things. They forget old things, meaning they have both types of amnesia that we'll talk about in a second. And they have something called confabulation, which is, well, they don't know that they're lying when they're saying something. So if you ask somebody who has Korsakoff's, what is today? And they go, okay, today is Thursday. And you're like, you're lying, it's Wednesday. They have no idea that it's not Thursday. They genuinely believe it. And they also have problems with source monitoring and reality monitoring, which is identifying where they've learned something from or if something that they know is true or false. So somebody who is confabulating about Thursday would have a false memory issue with what day of the week it actually is. So it's not fun. There's a video that I link to both the online class, which we'll see in person, and the in-person class, which we'll see in person, and the online class, which I sent a video thing to you. Sorry, reading a question. Does everyone get memory loss when they get older? Why is that? That's something that we talk about most specifically in chapter 12. It's like the very last real topic of the course. So, I mean, sure, I'll answer that right now. You got to think of the brain being like any other muscle in your body. So you see these things when you read the news. Well, nobody really does read the news anymore. But if you go on Facebook or Instagram and you see one of those stories where, there's a 90 or plus year old, bodybuilder that is still out running and out sporting and out everything-ing somebody that is, half their age or whatnot, they've put in a lot of work to retain the muscles in their body to the point where they could still be at that age and have the kind of strength that they do. It's not going to be the same exact strength that they had when they were younger, but it's still going to be superior to most people their age because that's what they do. They've exercised that to such an extent that they're still able to do those things with their body. And your brain is just another muscle that you have to continually exercise or it is going to degenerate, not necessarily even as you get much, much, much older, but, from maybe even your 20s to like your 50s, your brain could make this massive change if you don't do anything that exercises it at all. So there are ways to prevent memory loss, which you can take certain things. Some people believe that, omega-3s are really good for memory in terms of not preventing, but stalling Alzheimer's. There's different vitamins you can take, different supplements that people advertise and whatnot that actually do work. There's some that don't work that are advertised, so do your research in terms of that. Actively doing stuff like brain games, crosswords, reading, all those types of things that keep your brain engaged are going to prevent to some extent, memory loss. But if you are somebody that carries the gene, what is that? Or blank. I assume that whatever word you just used is that drug that they say will make you smarter. Am I right? Is that what you're talking about? I'm waiting for some sort of response. Because somebody asked me this question over the summer. Like, is it real that there are these drugs that can make you smarter? This is my response to that. It's a face of like, do you really believe that? Because I don't. The person that was in my class in summer, is it really spelled like that? Nootropics? The person that brought it up in the class last semester said that they take it and that it makes them feel great. But so does taking vitamins in general. I mean, if you're somebody that doesn't get really great vitamin intake and you take this bunch of vitamins, it's going to give you this rush. And if you feel better, you're probably going to feel better in all aspects of things. It is not going to make you more intelligent. The pill they sell made of only natural compounds, but it's trash. Yeah, I imagine that it is trash. Because first you have to think of, what are we defining intelligence as to begin with? Are you defining it as IQ? Are you defining it as life experiences that have led you to know the difference between right and wrong, or know how to do something better and whatnot? And taking a vitamin supplement is not going to make you a better carpenter. So let's say, you're in the carpentry field. I have no idea why I just picked that, but hey, so if you're in the carpentry field and you decide, I want to be a better carpenter, which is what most of your other fellow carpenters in your carpentry guild would say makes you a smarter or better person, whatever. And you go and you take those vitamins, is it going to make you better at building things? Is it going to make you know more suddenly about the way to craft wood, or how to make cabinets, or, do roofing or whatnot? No, it's not. It might make you more alert. The vitamin rush might make you more capable in that moment of utilizing the full potential of your brain, because it is getting the kinds of vitamins and nourishment that it needs. But in terms of making you smarter, no, it is not going to make you smarter. There is no such thing that is going to do that yet. And if there is, it is under lockdown in some government facility somewhere, being tested on super soldiers like they have in all the movies and whatnot. But I would not waste your money with it. If you're interested in the effects of it and don't want to spend the crazy amount of money that I'm sure they charge for it, look up what ingredients are in it. They have to tell you by law what is in a product. So go and pick up some of those vitamins and start taking them. See if it makes you feel any better. It might. Vitamin B deficiencies are pretty serious. So are vitamin D deficiencies, and they can start affecting the way that your brain works. So vitamin D in specific, I've been vitamin D deficient for years, and sometimes I take vitamins and sometimes I don't. Sometimes for months at a time, I forget to do it and it just falls out of my routine. And you can tell your cognitive awareness is just diminished. And yes, Javi, a lot of the medications that, or supplements or whatever that they use, do have caffeine in them, because caffeine is a stimulant. It's a stimulant, like you can see on whatever slide it was there that was listing out all of the neurotransmitters. It's something that is going to make your brain more alert. But it's also possible to overstimulate your brain. Like if I drink caffeine now, ta-da, it does nothing because my brain is so used to, my body is so used to having it that it just doesn't care anymore. Can someone develop dementia psychologically without neurological symptoms? How do I want to answer that? So dementia is a symptom, not necessarily an illness. So you can have dementia for a variety of reasons that aren't tied into your, like, the condition of your brain per se. So Alzheimer's is like a cause of dementia. I don't know if I'm saying this right, but there are also a lot of other things that can cause dementia, like having your medications mixed up. Certain medications don't go well together and they can cause symptoms of dementia. Certain illnesses can cause symptoms of dementia, and they're 100% curable by reverting whatever it was that you did to cause it. So you can have a medicinal interaction that causes dementia-like symptoms, and simply by not taking those medications, getting them out of your system and kind of resetting yourself to what you were before you started the interaction of those medications, the symptoms can dissipate. Some of them can be pre-Alzheimer's-y type symptoms, but can someone develop, like, I'm not sure what you mean by psychological dementia. I think that's kind of what's throwing me here, without neurological symptoms. I don't think there is such a thing as psychological dementia. What do you mean by that? Tell me. I'm waiting. So, after a trauma. So I assume you're asking if somebody goes through a psychological trauma, could they have symptoms of dementia without actually having any brain damage? So talking like PTSD type trauma? I assume that's what you mean by the question. I think you're asking me if somebody who has trauma that is not physical, so a psychological trauma, can manifest dementia symptoms without actually having any damage to their brain. And if that is what you mean, I hope that's what you mean. If that's what you mean, the kinds of post-traumatic stress reactions, there's a lot of different types of reactions that you can have to post-traumatic stress, but they're tied into memory in a different way. So we'll talk about that more when we're talking about episodic memory, memory of literally episodes. So, or if you want to like email me and talk about that outside of this, I'll do that just to not derail this a little bit. The quiz thing I'll talk about at the end, just remind me. So I'm going to go back to my structures here. So we're looking at the cortical structures now. We have four main lobes. And maybe not the most important, but the most prominent one in emotion and memory and source monitoring and false memory and all this different stuff is the frontal lobe. So the frontal lobe being right here, right up behind your eyes. So tied into emotions, your decision making, your metacognition, which is your awareness that you are aware. So your metacognition is like your awareness that you can be conscious, in so many words. So It's what makes you actively try to remember something. It's what helps you know what the source of what you're remembering is. The stuff that we talked about with Korsakoff's that you can't do anymore, like reality monitoring and source monitoring and whatnot, that comes from the frontal lobe. So, which ties into that thing that I was saying of confabulation. Say that 10 times fast. So it also makes it hard for you to have positive self-regulatory behavior and coping, problem solving and whatnot. So your frontal lobe is more delicate than you realize. A very small sort of trauma to your frontal lobe can go a long way. So if you're anything like me, I am super duper clumsy and pretty bad with my like spatial reasoning in terms of how far away I think something is from my face. So I go to get in the car and with all of my gusto, go to get in the car and whack my head on the door, the top of the car. Lots. I do it all the time. And you would think that I would learn to be a little more cautious when I get into cars, but I'm not. I still smack my head on the car all the time. And those little traumas add up over time to being a bigger trauma that can have serious memory issues tied to it. So sorry for those of you who are watching this after. I'm like trying to read all the comments that are scrolling down while I'm talking. So it might be a little bit fuzzy in terms of me making some sort of sense. But when you have frontal lobe traumas, they can be pretty serious and they can lead to different types of complicated amnesia and other types of problems too. So people with frontal lobe damage can become very aggressive. They can have really serious problems with their emotions and not only regulating their emotions, but understanding their emotions. So they can have problems in terms of understanding why they suddenly feel angry or why they feel happy or whatnot. And if you do have that kind of damage, you probably need some sort of medical help or medication to mitigate the symptoms that that's going to have. So back in the day, when somebody had a bad temperament or was a particularly angry person or whatnot, they would lobotomize them, which they would do it through your eye, right? Which goes into your frontal lobe. They go straight back like this. And they would kind of like chip out almost your frontal lobe. Think of like the Egyptians when they mummify somebody, they take a little thing and they stick it up your nose and they scoop your brains out with it. Yeah, lobotomies are fun. And they would do it because there's nothing, especially if you look at slide 24, there's nothing here that if it was missing would prevent you from living. It's just that it would prevent you from really being a person. It would significantly impact your personality. So their thoughts were, if we lobotomize them, nothing wrong is going to happen and they'll be more calm because that temperamental problem that they have will be solved by the fact that their brain won't be able to have that emotion anymore. And what they found was, yes, people were relatively calm, but they lost all sense of self in the process. They didn't have emotions. They were not the people that they were before. They were kind of like walking human zombies once they didn't have their frontal lobes. So next slide is the temporal lobe. So here we have something similar to the hippocampus if we damage it, which would lead to some sort of amnesia, which we'll talk about in a second. Your temporal lobe is just connected mostly to language and speaking and the memory of things that are vocal or visual in some way, shape, or form. So music and art and whatnot, your temporal lobe would play a huge part in the memory of that and the processing of that. So slide 26, the other two lobes, the parietal lobe, which is your somatosensory lobe. Say that 10 times fast too. So that one regulates your five senses. So taste, touch, sight, smell, and hearing. Got it all in the first try. So all of those sorts of things are processed through your parietal lobe. And then you have your occipital lobe, which occipital, for me, I automatically associate with vision just because of the word occipital, but it is where all of your visual imagery is processed in terms of what your eyes are actually recognizing, not so much drawing up imagery in your head of something. So you have this specific little area in your occipital lobe called V4. And if you have damage of the V4, you can forget colors, but that is different than color blindness. So color blindness is something that you have at birth. You do not become colorblind. You either are or you're not. There's different types of color blindness. There's, red-green colorblind. There's red something else colorblind, and then there's total color blindness where you can only see in shades of black and white. That's all stuff that you're born with, like I said, chromosomal. So this V4 is just you forgetting suddenly what purple is. Like you see the color purple and you have no idea that you have ever even seen that as something before. It's kind of amnesia for colors. And then slide 27, what I was talking about this whole time, the basics of amnesia. So we talk about amnesia a lot in this course. So you'll hear about this again in many, many chapters. But there's two main types of amnesia. So you have anterograde amnesia, which is your inability to form new memories. So think of 50 First Dates or anything really where somebody can remember everything that's happened to them in the past, but their ability to form new memories and specifically episodic memories, memories tied into people's place, things like that. They have a serious issue with that. And then you have retrograde. Javi, you were just like my little brainiac today. Your retrograde is your inability to retrieve past memories. So Dory definitely has retrograde amnesia. She has issues with retrieving past memories, but she also has anterograde amnesia because she has problems retaining memories past a few seconds. So poor Dory, she's just like a bottle of beer away from Korsakoff's. It's just not looking good for her. So this kind of answers your question before, that drugs can make you more alert, but they're not going to necessarily improve your memory or prevent you from losing your memory. But there is one type of drug that is used as a preventative, and it's specifically for Alzheimer's. So Alzheimer's is, again, something we talk about way later in the semester. But if you look at your neuron image from earlier in the presentation, Alzheimer's happens when those neurons develop something called amyloid plaques. So think of just like a tarry substance building up on the parts of the neuron that are trying to communicate with other neurons, and something called neurofibrillary tangles. So they develop a plaque and then they get all tangled up. And their ability to communicate with each other is severely dampened to the point where there is no communication between the neurons in the brains. In the brains, and you have multiple of them. So if you think to your subcortical brain, it is regulating whether you eat, sleep, breathe, anything. So when your brain gets to the point where these tangles are built so far up and the connection, no, not at the synapse, we're talking like everywhere in the brain. Like, so if you look at the axon that has those myelin sheaths, the sheath that protects the long axon from losing that signal, think of just like a plaque, like the same thing that you would have on your teeth or build up anywhere. It just builds up and it lessens the ability of that neurochemical connection to even happen. So everything breaks down. Everything stops talking to each other. So Alzheimer's is terminal, not because of the aspect of losing your memory in terms of you forget, who your son and daughter is, or, your own name, or whatever it is that by the end stage you're forgetting. It's because your brain breaks down so much from that buildup that the communication with anything isn't happening anymore. Your brain's not communicating with your heart, telling it to pump blood throughout your body. Your brain's not communicating with your lungs, telling it that it needs to breathe. It's not communicating with your liver, telling you it needs to filter, certain things out of your body. So you lose all functioning because your brain, it's just these tangles and these plaques are everywhere. So cholinergics are a type of medication that prevents the buildup of these plaques, kind of. It like stalls out. It's called acetylcholine, which they don't have it in the slide, but I'm going to make sure that I pull it up here so that acetylcholine is a neurotransmitter that influences your movement and your overall motor skills. So what these cholinergics do, now I've lost the video, is they kind of stall out the plaques and the tangles from happening. So if you're somebody that is genetically predisposed to have Alzheimer's, which it's kind of something that you're either born with or you're not, like you're going to have Alzheimer's or you're not. There's a certain component of genetics there that not necessarily mean that it's hereditary, but that it's something that you were born with either the predisposition to have it or not. So you can be tested to find out whether or not you possess the gene that is going to lead to the development of Alzheimer's. It's not like a 100% thing that if you have this gene that you're going to develop Alzheimer's or whatever, but it is something that you can test for and determine whether or not that it's a possibility for you in your future. But these cholinergics, they just work with the acetylcholine, the neurotransmitters, to kind of slow the process down. So, like I said, what at the Alzheimer's level is the biggest impact is not necessarily stage 1 or stage 2, where you're having these, what are relatively minor memory lapses that could be mistaken for dementia, or that can be worked around just by having certain reminders set up in your life or somebody help you or whatever. What kills you is when your brain gets to these latter stages and just totally breaks down. So it's kind of hoping that the medication will help the person outlive the stages of Alzheimer's, because we associate Alzheimer's so heavily with being elderly, but there's early onset Alzheimer's that can affect people, like 50 years old who are full-fledged, kind of end stage Alzheimer's and don't remember anything. There's movies about that too. So if you don't remember what it is, I know one has Kate Winslet in it, but you can go find that if you care. So something else in the category of drugs and memory is benzodiazepines. And this is something that I harp on so strongly in every single one of my classes related to memory. And I even talk about it in some of my classes not related to memory. Because I personally am somebody that has been prescribed a benzodiazepine for the majority of my life. So a benzo it's a category of controlled substances. It's Valium, Xanax, like anything that ends in like PAM or AM, clonazepam, Klonopin, whatever. It's usually prescribed as a sedative or for anxiety, which is what I take it for, anxiety. So taking this, and especially at higher dosages, creates anterograde amnesia, but it's not actual anterograde. It's like a simulated anterograde amnesia. And it can prevent you from remembering things that have happened while you're on that medication. So if I was to say I'm feeling particularly anxious and I take a benzodiazepine before I go in to teach class, and a student comes up to me after class and asks me a question and talks to me a little bit about their personal life, something that doesn't have anything to do necessarily with the course, something that's much more in that episodic person-to-person category. And then I go home, I wake up the next day, I go into class, I see the student. It's possible that through taking the benzodiazepines and through that simulated anterograde amnesia that I can forget what question it was that they asked me the day before. So if you have those people in your life that are very forgetful, and be like, I don't remember you saying that to me yesterday, or I didn't remember your birthday, and whatever. Make sure that you check and see if they're using benzodiazepines, because it's a pretty strong thing. And you should definitely not mix them with alcohol. Number one, it can outright kill you. The chemical combination can outright stop your brain from functioning and can kill you. But if it doesn't kill you at the right levels, it will create not just blackouts, but severe amnesia for the time period around when you took it. And I have a story, which I will not post on YouTube, about this, but I almost died because of that, not knowing that those two things interacted. Please don't do it. Please. So if you know anybody that takes them, whether they're prescribed or it's recreational or whatever, somebody takes it for, don't do it. Don't mix it. Don't drive while you're on it. Avoid that. And don't take it before you do something really, really important. So what's left of this chapter? The olfactory bulb, which is smelling, and there's a slide on memory and music, which I'm not going to ask you about. But in terms of the olfactory slide, the one thing that I thought was slightly neat, maybe it's just because I'm a cat person, is if you look at the olfactory bulb of a human, which there's a picture of it there. It's like this little tiny thing right up here somewhere above your nose. And you compare it to the relative size of a cat's olfactory bulb in their brain, their olfactory bulb is way bigger than ours. And if you compare our sense of smell to that of a feline, it's not as good. So even though other species, other animals, whatnot, may have smaller brains or may not process things on an emotional level like we do and whatnot, they have other things that make up for what we don't necessarily do very well. Like a lot of species have way better hearing and way better vision than us. They use different senses to kind of get by from that evolutionary standpoint. So if you have any general questions, I'll answer them. If you were just here for like the chapter 2 breakdown, you can say goodbye because it's done. Congratulations, you made it to the end of this hour of interestingness. Somebody had questions. Who asked? Something about the PowerPoints and the quizzes. So I don't remember what exactly. Okay, what about quiz 2? So I'm going to go in and hand make quiz 2 because the person who is overseeing my Blackboard courses or my Canvas courses in general doesn't have, be safe, fly safe. She doesn't have the time to do it yet because the first couple of weeks are very hectic for them with their regular online classes. So the in-person ones are not their priority. So I'm going to hand make quiz 2. It'll be there. Let me see where exactly it'll be. If you go in, there should be a link that says, well, actually it might not be there yet, but there will be a link. Yeah, there's a link there that says quizzes. And you'll go into that quiz section and it'll just literally say quiz 2. I won't call it quiz 1 because I don't want to confuse you, even though we didn't really have a quiz 1. So it'll say quiz 2 and it'll be there. And I'll also upload, I sent out the PowerPoint, but I will upload it there too. So there's a modules tab. That modules tab will have a link to it'll have the PowerPoints there. It'll have a document that has all of the videos from the semester that I plan to either play in class or that you need to be watching from home. everything for the semester will be there. So don't be concerned in any way, shape, or form about missing anything, or don't stress about quizzes or exams or anything like that, because you'll be fine. I will never, ever hold against you something that you had no control over, which is me. So from that standpoint, I hope you feel okay. There's still 12 of you here, so I'm assuming somebody has a question. No. Well, if you need anything, just email me. I have Canvas linked into my phone now too. Oh, yes, quiz 2 will be on this chapter 2 PowerPoint. I'm trying to think, is there anything that you wouldn't need to know from this? But I try to cut this down to the main points as much as possible. And I promise you that it does get better as the semester goes on. This is my least favorite chapter, just because for me, communicating biology is not the easiest thing in the world. But the conceptual stuff that we do from here on out is pretty cool and pretty interactive, a lot more interactive than this is the brain. How many questions? 10. Thank you. Okay, I'll see you guys. Remember that Monday there's no class because it is Labor Day, right? That's the right holiday. So please be safe when you go out, wherever it is that you're going. Don't mix benzos and alcohol. It's a mean face. Please don't go anywhere where they tend to shoot people either, which seems to be everywhere now. But be safe, and I'll see you guys on Wednesday. Just email me if you have any questions.